I hadn't planned to stay long. Just a few days to visit my elder brother Samir and catch my breath before starting a new job in Lahore. City life had worn me thin, and the idea of quiet meals, late mornings, and a warm home pulled me back to our old town. Their home smelled like memories: cardamom tea, roasted cumin, and the faint sweetness of detergent. Anaya, my sister-in-law, greeted me at the door with her usual soft smile. She had married Samir 5 years ago, and though she was technically family, I always saw her as more of a friend: polite, gracious, and quietly elegant. She moved around the house with effortless calm, tending to details no one else noticed. She asked how I'd been, how the city was treating me, and whether I still drank my tea without sugar. There was warmth in her voice, familiar, comforting, and just a little too tender. One afternoon, I woke up later than usual and wandered toward the kitchen in search of chai. The house was unusually silent. The clock ticked steadily as I stepped into the tiled room, where sunlight cut through the half-drawn curtains in soft stripes. Anaya stood with her back to me, mixing something in a pot on the stove. She was humming, an old tune I recognized from childhood, maybe a lullaby. She didn't hear me approach. "Anaya, Bobby." She turned abruptly, eyes wide. For a second I thought I'd startled her. But then, without saying a word, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. It wasn't a hesitant hug. It was firm, lingering, like she had been holding something in and finally let it go. Her head rested against my chest. I froze, arms half raised in confusion. My heart stuttered. "I'm sorry," she whispered, pulling back a little. I don't know. I thought you were someone else for a second." I managed a nervous chuckle, but something inside me shifted. Her face flushed as she quickly turned back to the stove, brushing her hair behind her ear like nothing had happened. The room felt warmer than before. I poured myself a cup of tea, pretending not to notice the way her hands trembled slightly as she stirred. We didn't speak about the hug again. Maybe it was nothing, just a fleeting mistake in a quiet house. But later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help replaying that moment over and over. It wasn't the hug that unsettled me. It was the way I didn't want it to end. Over the next few days, I found myself drawn to the kitchen more often, not out of hunger but habit. Anaya was always there, humming, slicing vegetables, or rinsing dishes under a soft stream of water. Her movements were methodical, almost meditative. It became easy to linger, easier still to talk. She laughed easily, a quiet, genuine kind of laugh that felt like a reward. We shared old stories from our childhoods, hers about village summers and mine about broken bicycles and scraped knees. She asked questions no one else bothered to. What did I dream of becoming before life got practical? What kind of books did I read now? Had I fallen in love yet? Adelaide said no. One afternoon, as rain tapped softly against the windows, we sat at the dining table folding laundry. Her hands moved quickly. Mine fumbled. She teased me, and for a moment everything felt innocent again. But then she looked up at me, eyes quiet, and asked, "Do you ever feel like something important passed you by while you were too busy being strong?" I didn't know how to answer. That night the power went out. The house dimmed into darkness, broken only by the flicker of a single candle in the lounge. Samir had gone to attend a business dinner. Anaya and I sat across from each other on the carpet, sipping tea and listening to the wind scratch against the windows. She spoke of silence, of how it had become her companion, of how Samir no longer noticed the small things, that he was a good man, responsible, dependable, but distant, like a photograph left too long in the sun. "I'm not unhappy," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Just unseen." A log shifted in my chest. I should have changed the subject. I should have left the room. But instead, I told her she wasn't invisible to me. Her hands brushed. A light touch, almost accidental. But neither of us pulled away. The candle trembled in the breeze. The room felt smaller, the silence thicker. Every word felt charged, every glance an invitation. I saw the question in her eyes, but she didn't speak it aloud. Neither did I. Later, as I lay in bed, The scent of her jasmine shampoo still lingered on my sleeve. I stared at the ceiling, willing sleep to come. Didn't. I wasn't sure where the line was anymore, or whether we had already crossed it. The next few days passed with a strained kind of normalcy. Conversations were shorter, eye contact rarer. Anaya avoided lingering near me, but when we did speak, it felt as though every word was perched on the edge of something we didn't dare name. Samir remained unaware, too caught up in work calls, schedules, and late-night reports to notice the storm quietly building inside his home. Then came Friday. Samir had to leave for an overnight client meeting in another city. Before leaving, he casually asked me to look after the house in his absence. I nodded, trying not to read into the weight of those words. Anaya stayed silent, offering only a faint smile as he kissed her on the forehead and left. That evening, the house grew unusually still. I heard the hum of the refrigerator, the clink of a spoon against ceramic, the low rustle of her movements in the kitchen. The pull was magnetic, unavoidable. I found her stirring soup in silence, back to me, just like before. Something about the image, the dim lighting, the soft simmer of the stove, felt painfully familiar. "I thought you'd be upstairs," she said without turning. "I couldn't sleep." She finally turned. Her eyes met mine, and this time she didn't look away. "I made too much," she whispered. Again. We sat across from each other at the dining table, the silence between us heavy, waiting. She looked tired, not just physically, but like someone who'd been holding her breath for too long. "I don't know what this is," I said quietly, "but it doesn't feel wrong when I'm with you." Her hands trembled slightly as she set her spoon down. "You see me. That's more than anyone's done in years." And just like that it happened. The space between us vanished. Her hand reached for mine, and I met her halfway. The kiss was soft at first, uncertain, hesitant. But when our lips touched, it felt like the world slipped away. For a few seconds there was no guilt, no family ties, no rules, just breathless silence and the racing beat of hearts that had been denied for too long. When we pulled apart, reality hit us like cold water. She stood abruptly, stepping away as if burned. "We shouldn't have. I'm sorry." I wanted to say something, anything to make it less wrong, but my mouth felt dry. She didn't speak again, just turned and disappeared into her room, leaving the half-eaten soup and a silence that roared louder than any fight ever could. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I regretted the kiss, but because I wasn't sure she even remembered it in the same way. The next morning was unsettlingly normal. Anaya moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, preparing breakfast as though nothing had happened. She asked if I wanted tea, handed me a plate of toast, and smiled in that distant way people do when they're pretending their hearts aren't at war with their minds. I studied her carefully, searching for any flicker of the woman who had kissed me the night before. But she offered nothing, no glance, no hesitation. Just silence wrapped in politeness. Samir returned that evening, tired and unaware. He hugged her, thanked her for managing the house, then asked me how things had been. I lied again and smiled through clenched teeth. That night I packed my bag. The walls of that house had become too loud with everything unspoken. I told Samir I had to leave early for work preparations. He seemed surprised but didn't question it. When I stepped into the lounge the next morning, Anaya was already there, sipping her tea by the window. She didn't look at me. I stood there for a long moment, waiting for acknowledgement, a word, anything. But she just said, "Have a safe journey." That was it. No explanation. No apology. No trace of the night that had changed everything for me and apparently nothing for her. I left a note in the kitchen drawer. It wasn't dramatic. Just a thank you and a vague line about memories I didn't know what to do with. I didn't sign it. Weeks passed. Then months. I tried to bury that chapter in work and distance. But memory is stubborn. Some nights, I still wake up tasting that silence. The one that followed our kiss. That kitchen, her embrace, the way she made me feel seen, if only briefly. One day, scrolling through social media, I stumbled across a photo. Samir and Anaya, smiling at a cousin's wedding. Her hand rested on his shoulder, her smile perfectly in place. She looked whole, unbothered, in touch, and I realized something then. Something that stung more than guilt ever could. Maybe I wasn't her turning point. Maybe I was just a pause. A quiet moment in her long, well-managed life. A crack she allowed herself, then sealed shut before anyone could notice. I had fallen into something I mistook for love. But perhaps, for her, it was never more than loneliness wearing a soft disguise. To carry that kitchen hug with me still. Not because it was the beginning of something beautiful, but because it marked the moment I learned how betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in the voice of someone who once hugged you like they meant it, and then forgot you like they didn't.